E, Indian Lake. It's 8 o'clock.
Good morning. This is Northern Light for Monday, May 8th. I'm Monica Sandreski.
And I'm Todd Moe.
Many indigenous tribes have waited years for New York to officially pass a law protecting remains found in unmarked graves. After 25 years, it's finally happening.
It does have teeth. Private landowners can be subject to a Class E felony if they do not abide by the law.
One of the biggest sticking points in the budget was changes to the state's bail reform policy. Joshua Solomon with the Albany Times-Union breaks down those changes.
This is a clear signal to judges on what the legislature wants them to do on felony repeat offenses.
And we'll walk through the woods at Paul Smith's with Vermont poet David Cruz as he shares a seasonal poem about a time when he couldn't quite identify the song of a warbler.
This was a little bit of a frustrating moment for me, but I had a beautiful poem come out of it, so maybe that's a good thing.
All of that and more is coming up on Northern Light. Stick with us.
Broadcast of Northern Light here on North Country Public Radio, supported by the Village Mercantile, bringing Saranac Lake to places beyond the Adirondacks, offering Adirondack-made and inspired goods. VillageMerc.com, anything but general. And by Apothecary Chocolates, making gourmet chocolates by hand from all natural herbs, botanicals, tree syrups. ApothecaryChocolates.com.
This is Northern Light. I'm Monica Sandreski.
And I'm Todd Moe. New York will soon enact a law to protect the remains of indigenous people and others found in unmarked graves. It's a bill that tribes have fought for more than 25 years to pass. WSHU's Janice Roman reports.
Lawmakers passed a bill that would protect unmarked burial sites found on privately owned land from destruction. The original bill was vetoed by Governor Kathy Hochul, and a new bill was reintroduced into the legislature. When the state's annual budget was approved, it included a provision to authorize the Unmarked Burial Site Protection Act. Tila Troge is a sovereignty attorney for the Shinnecock Tribal Nation. Troge says 5 tribes work together with assembly members to continue negotiations. She says the new bill is an even stronger piece of legislation.
It does have teeth. Private landowners can be subject to a Class E felony if they do not abide by the law.
Private developers that find suspected remains would be required to stop development and contact the state. The bill also protects the unmarked graves of enslaved populations and Revolutionary War soldiers.
We just really remained passionate, dedicated, and we stuck to what we needed for our ancestors.
Troge says although it's been a long process, it's been worthwhile. The governor is expected to sign the bill into law in the coming days. For North Country Public Radio, I'm Janice Roman.
As Janice mentioned, lawmakers finally approved the new state budget last week. One of the biggest issues that held up the budget-making process was further revisions to New York's bail reform laws from 2019. Joshua Solomon is a reporter for the Albany Times-Union who's been covering the issue. He spoke with Lucy Grindon about what's changed in the state's bail policy.
Previously or currently, judges have to weigh the least restrictive means to ensure a defendant returns back to court. Instead, it's now the degree of control or restriction necessary to reasonably assure the person's return to court. In legal terms, that's a different standard. That means that judges will have a little more leeway in deciding when to set bail or how much bail to set potentially.
Why are certain criminal justice advocates and lawmakers on the left not happy with these changes?
Those on the left and public defenders view this as a rollback, and they view it as potentially incarcerating more individuals who, generally speaking, especially down in New York City, are Black and brown individuals, potentially holding them in jail pre-trial before they've been accused of anything. They view that as a fundamental rollback of the changes to the state's bail law that they fought very hard for in 2019. Those on the right, especially upstate, view this as not doing enough. They say there needs to be a complete, clear dangerousness standard. And so they view anything short of that as not living up to the need.
So what exactly are Republicans asking for when they say they want a dangerousness standard?
They want what's in other states, where a judge is able to say, I'm going to hold this individual in jail because I think you are a threat to public safety.
And in theory, that would give judges a little more discretion to be subjective about whether an individual is a threat?
Correct. And progressives are worried that would bring in race, that would bring in ethnicity and a discriminatory practice. And what the governor's office is trying to do with these set of variables is limit the amount of discretion or prejudice a judge could bring when deciding whether someone is quote unquote dangerous by instead saying, here are exact factors that we're going to consider, instead of making up what we may consider dangerous. One piece here that's a little less talked about is that they've said, if you were accused of a felony, you were then released by the judge following your arraignment, and then you were arrested again on another felony, the judge now has substantially greater ability that when that defendant comes back after being accused now of 2 felonies, regardless of whether they are quote unquote eligible for bail, the judge can set bail, the judge can remand that individual.
So you're saying if it's the second felony that person has been arrested for, then the judge can set bail or remand that individual even if the second felony or the first felony was not one of the more serious ones?
Yes, a judge can now do that. This is a clear signal to judges on what the legislature wants them to do on felony repeat offenses.
What are some examples of nonviolent felonies where this is a relevant change?
The best one to think about is burglary. It's not an armed robbery. It's not violent, but it is a felony. And burglaries have gone up. And this is an issue folks are worried about.
Have we gone back to the way it was before the 2019 bail reforms, or are things still pretty different from how it was before 2019?
It's still different. It's different for both eligible offenses and non-eligible offenses.
Can you explain the difference between an eligible offense and a non-eligible offense?
For violent felonies and certain non-violent felonies, judges are allowed to set bail or remand an individual to jail pre-trial. On misdemeanors and some nonviolent felonies, judges are not allowed to set bail or send a person straight to pretrial detention. And the biggest difference for these quote-unquote eligible serious crimes is that judges have to consider a list of variables that progressives would call a dangerousness standard, and moderates and Republicans would say are just a random list of things that a judge could consider on whether or not someone has committed a crime before or possesses a gun or something of that nature.
That was Joshua Solomon, reporter at the Albany Times-Union. He spoke with Lucy Grindon.
You're listening to Northern Light here on North Country Public Radio. Time coming up on 10 minutes past 8. Good morning. I'm Todd Moe.
And I'm Monica Sandreski. Just ahead, we'll catch up with Vermont poet David Cruz during a trail walk at the Paul Smith's College Vic and Poetry for Spring. That conversation in just a few minutes right here on Northern Light.
Music by Stony Creek guitarist Hank Soto. Check out more of his music anytime on our website. Visit ncpr.org/_. Northern Light is supported by Adirondack Experience, the museum on Blue Mountain Lake, presenting the online Artists and Inspiration series on May 15th at 7 p.m. More at the adkx.org.
Apollo Global Management, a private equity firm, is buying Arconic Corporation for $5.2 billion. Arconic is an aluminum products company that spun off from Alcoa in 2016. It currently operates a plant next to Alcoa in Messina. Stock shares in Arconic jumped more than 25% on the news. Apollo will buy those shares and make Arconic a private company. In a press release, Apollo said it is committed to investing significant capital in Arconic, including technological upgrades and plant improvements. But it remains unclear how the purchase will affect Messina. As of last summer, 124 people worked at Arconic in Messina when the union approved a new contract. Arconic has struggled with falling aluminum prices in the last couple of years.
The state's budget that was passed last week includes $134 million for funding free school meals for students. WRVO's Ava Pukach reports that New York will reimburse schools participating in the federal Community Eligibility Program.
Schools currently qualify for the program if 40% of their students qualify for free meals. The federal government said it would drop this threshold to 25%. Democratic State Senator John Mannion says the state funding combined with federal government assistance means free school breakfast and lunch will be available to 81% of the state's student population.
It helps kids learn, it helps them succeed, it provides them with the stability that's necessary to be successful in school, and it removes some of the stigma that is involved when we're talking about students in a school setting that are hungry and may not have the funds necessary to purchase breakfast or lunch on that day.
Dan Bowles, superintendent of the North Syracuse Central School District, says students should not have to worry about hunger when they're trying to learn. He noted students were participating in state testing and should be able to focus on their work, not the rumbling of their stomach.
As adults, we recognize that we are not productive when we are hungry, so imagine the impact on a child. Food insecurity is a growing problem, and without the diligence of our local politicians, this would not have become a reality.
The program goes into effect in the fall. In Syracuse, I'm Ava Pukach for North Country Public Radio.
A student from North Country Community College has been awarded one of the top academic awards in the SUNY system. Sydney Van Nest received the 2023 SUNY Chancellor's Award for Student Excellence. Van Nest is a sophomore in NCCC's Radiologic Technology program and a North Country local from Lowville. Van Nest was selected based on her accomplishments in the classroom and in her community. She volunteers with the Lewis County Christmas Sharing Program, cares for her elderly grandparents, and has maintained a 3.88 GPA and received the Radiologist's Excellence Award for freshman year. Van Nest was honored at the awards ceremony in Albany last month. She was one of about 200 students from across New York State to receive the award. You're listening to Northern Light here on North Country Public Radio. I'm Todd Moe.
And I'm Monica Sandreski. In just a minute, a walk in the woods and some poetry, too. Then stick around after the show for Bird Note. A musician shares about the patterns in the song of the song Sparrow, coming up at 8:42. But first, Todd has a look at the weather for us.
Nice day for a walk today. Sunshine, highs this afternoon in the 50s and 60s. Winds out of the north-northwest. And according to the Weather Service, sunshine tomorrow and again on Wednesday. Gradually milder temperatures this week. Highs tomorrow in the 60s for much of our region. Light winds out of the northeast. A high in the upper 60s on Wednesday. We'll see temperatures near 70 on Thursday and in the 70s on Friday. Maybe some scattered rain on Friday, but at this point, that's the only day that the Weather Service predicts any rain for this week. Sunshine today, tomorrow, and Wednesday. Right now in Canton, sunny and 52 degrees.
Spring is the season of returning. Vermont poet David Cruz has written a lot about hiking in the high peaks and returned to the Adirondacks recently for a poetry reading and a walk with Todd. We've asked David Cruz each season to share a story and a poem over the last few years. The New Jersey native has lived, worked, and created poetry in the North Country and the Northeast as a writer of place. One of his favorite spots is Mount Monadnock in southern New Hampshire. It connects to his interest in place and the land as a writer. He's also the author of Wander Thrush, Lyric Essays of the Adirondacks and High Peaks, a poetry collection that catalogs hiking the Adirondack 46. These days, he's living in Vermont, working on a farm, researching history, reconnecting with the land, and writing poetry. He was invited back to the Adirondacks in late April for a poetry reading at Hotel Saranac, sponsored by the North Winds Fine Arts Gallery. Our Todd Moe caught up with him on a trail at the Paul Smith College Vic for a chat and a chance to hear poetry for a new season.
So, David, we're here in the middle of this gorgeous trail here at the Paul Smith's Vic, surrounded by these very friendly, cheerful chickadees, right?
Yeah, chickadees, yep, for sure.
And as usual, I've asked you to share a poem. So if you want to set this one up, and then let's hear it.
Sure thing. So this poem, of course, is part of that Monadnock project that I've been working on now for a couple of years. In order to get out to Monadnock, it's about an hour and a half drive from where I am in southern Vermont. So I have to cross the Southern Green Mountains, and I link up to Brattleboro, and of course I get to cross the Connecticut River each time. And that's a bit of an important place because part of this research that I've been doing and learning about as I've been writing this long poem is it's really been taking me back in history to learn about a lot of the indigenous peoples who inhabited the Northeast and the rivers. You know, so many of the tribes were named after the rivers. The river was a life source for them. And so crossing that Connecticut River to then get over to Monadnock is always, it's a little bit of a sacred journey, you know, or it's turned into one, right? And of course, I do have a fragment about the Connecticut River that's part of the larger story. But this poem I have today, this fragment, is really just for springtime because here we are, it's April, you know, just outside Saranac Lake in this beautiful place. And so this poem is about when I was when I was visiting Monadnock in 2021, there was a warbler that I knew, and yet I couldn't quite place the song. And I kind of pride myself on knowing bird songs and being able to name them. And this was a little bit of a frustrating moment for me, but I had a beautiful poem come out of it. So maybe that's a good thing. So here, this is a fragment from Monadnock. I am no map maker, and this warbler's song I cannot place to name. It has been a year since I've heard him sing. What care can I give his solitude? Little messenger, untranslatable, make me silent as the page, aperture of light, for the bedrock sees us, hears us, fills fold and fissure in duff, sheep laurel, microscopic life. I like that little poem.
Yeah. Oh, it fits so well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a long lyric poem on one mountain, right? It's about 53 pages, I think, the manuscript. And one thing I've struggled with is how much of the story can I tell, right? I mean, there's so much. And so, here's a little fragment from it where it doesn't seem like it's a whole lot perhaps on its own, but in the tapestry of the larger lyric poem, I think it has its own part, right? Yeah, so I'm excited about this work. And for the last, I think, maybe 5-6 years now, the North Wind Fine Arts Gallery, we've been doing this Poetry Month celebration, which is a sort of poetry and visual art collaboration. The 2 poems that I wrote this year were, as I was collaborating with a woman named Mary Johnson. She's an acrylic painter, and she painted 2 lovely scenes. One was called Blue Woods, and the other was Autumn Sky. And I got to tell you, Todd, both of these paintings took me back to my time in New Jersey. One took me back to Jenny Jump State Park, where neighbor Tom and I would hike routinely. And the Blue Woods, it literally looks like, we would meet after school, and we would head into the woods at about 4 o'clock when it was getting dark already. We would hike in. We would spend the sunset up at the summit, a few miles in. I got to tell you, when I saw Mary's painting, it took me right back to that time, and it made me, my chest, my stomach just ached with the nostalgia, of just kind of times past. And yeah.
Do you want to read the...
Yeah, it's a nice poem. It's a little bit of a winter-ish poem, but...
We're just coming off winter.
I was going to say, yeah, if you're hiking in the high peaks, right, you're still hitting snow, and pockets of snow for sure. Right. This poem is titled Blue Woods, which is the same title that Mary gave her painting. This is the light we know, you'd say, when the woods turn blue in the cold quiet of winter at dusk. And I remember still those hike days after school, the trail left to the soft cooing of owls along the ridge, mountain streams falling, we would climb the murmuring on rocks around ice and snow, and the quiet chips of juncos darkening the forest that felt like a great expanse, utterly ours, because we were there sharing in the great offering the living world gives us. And how I miss those days so much, it makes my chest ache in a nostalgia only we could know or understand. Simple little poems, but they have so much feeling, right, around them. Yeah.
And I think it's amazing that a painting can inspire that,
Totally.
And just sort of your mind goes back to that moment.
Totally. I've been doing a lot of collaborations with visual artists, and it's interesting because in the creative process, there comes a divergent point where you could either take the painting and use it as inspiration to kind of launch into your own territory, or you could try to get closer to perhaps what that painter is trying to do. Some poems, they go one way and then others go another. You never know what you might expect in something like that, like a collaboration, which is probably why they're fun.
Poet David Cruz is the author of Wander Thrush, Lyric Essays of the Adirondacks, and High Peaks, a poetry collection that catalogs hiking the Adirondack 46ers. These days, he's living in Vermont, working on a farm, researching history, reconnecting with the land, and writing poetry. And there's a link to his website on our website at ncpr.org. Music featuring Colton guitarist Paul Myers. Paul will be leading a concert that includes his World on a String trio coming up May 20th, Saturday, May 20th, 7 p.m. at the Edwards Opera House. It's a concert that features music, Brazilian rhythms, samba, bossa nova, lots of great, a rich world of rhythms and styles. It's Paul Myers and his World on a String trio at the Edwards Opera House coming up on Saturday, May 20th, 7 p.m. There's more information and tickets available at edwardsoperahouse.com. 26 minutes past 8. This is Northern Light. I'm Todd Moe.
And I'm Monica Sandreski. Many ways to celebrate spring in the North Country, including coming up this Saturday at the Gateway Museum in Morristown. They're holding their annual Spring Art Festival. There'll be a silent auction, music, food, and new enchanted trail with fairy houses produced by the Morristown Central School Art Department and students under the direction of Jim Murray. You can meet artists that will be on display there. Melanie Connor, Marianne Evans, Anne French, Pam Morley, Mark Schwartz, Dot and Jeff Swift, Jack Taylor, and others. That's coming up not this Saturday, May 27th, later this month from 10 to 3 at the Gateway Museum in Morristown.
Stop by the John Brown Farm, a historic site just outside of Lake Placid this week. There are three events, actually, starting tomorrow and continuing on Saturday to commemorate Black freedom and abolitionist history in the Adirondacks. You can stop by tomorrow afternoon for the unveiling of a memorial field with Wren Davidson Seward at the John Brown Farm Historic Site. That starts at from 5 to 6. Take a walk of that memorial field, and then you can join the Lake Placid Center for the Arts for Geography of Grace screening. It's a conversation and reception starting at 6:30. That's choreographer Tiffany Ray Fisher screening her dance film Geography of Grace at the Lake Placid Center for the Arts. That's happening Tuesday night, and then John Brown Day is Saturday from 2 to 4. At the John Brown Farm. It'll be an opportunity to remember award-winning novelist Russell Banks, who died in January. His novel, Cloud Splitter, revived popular interest in John Brown. That's all happening this week at the John Brown Farm.
And tune in Thursday evening to hear from Hudson Valley painter Martin Weinstein. He has a solo exhibition right now at the Courthouse Gallery at the Lake George Arts Project. For a long time, he was an abstract painter until he sort of came to this point of transition of searching for ways of painting that would satisfy his love of the visible world. So he sort of combines the natural, the real world, and this sort of dreamlike quality in his paintings. And there will be an online artist talk this Thursday evening at 6 o'clock with the Lake George Arts Project. You can find out more and get that free Zoom link at lakegeorgearts.org.
That's it for Northern Light on this Monday, May 8th.
Morning Edition continues in just a minute, including with a story from California. A task force there approved recommendations on how the state can apologize to and compensate descendants of slavery. The recommendations head to state lawmakers next. More on that coming up in just a few minutes on Morning Edition.
Thanks for listening. I'm Todd Moe.
And I'm Monica Sandreski. Be well.